And this happens repetitively in Minnesota.
Over and over and over and over and over again. It drives me crazy.
In fact, over 94% of all judges in Minnesota were originally appointed to their position, despite the fact that if you read our Constitution, it says that judges are to be elected. The judges are gaming this system. They're gaming it so that there are appointments when there should be elections. And the state Supreme Court, and again this includes Helen Meyer, my opponent, just created a new rule just a few months ago that simply is going to allow this appointment process to go on. They can have appointment and resignation, and you could possibly never have another election for Chief Justice. In oral argument before the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, the Attorney General was asked if this went on for 100 years, would he think that was a problem? And he said, no, that's not a problem. And there was laughter in the galleries. But if you look at what our state Supreme Court decided, they in fact decided that it is okay, that you can have appointment after appointment after appointment with all these resignations and never have an election. Even worse than that, Sue, if you take their rule and apply it, you could have two judges up for election. Let's say Judge A, who's the Chief Justice, and Judge B, who's an Associate Justice, and they're both supposed to be up for election. Judge A resigns, the governor appoints Judge B to A's position, and then appoints A to B's position. So they switch spots, and both those elections will be taken off the ballot.
Right.
And then two years go by, and they're up for election again. They could do it again, and they could go back and forth indefinitely. But that's the kind of law that we're getting out of our state Supreme Court. It's ridiculous. It's to the point of absurdity, and we need to stop it.
Exactly right. All right. You're running for the Supreme Court. What does the Supreme Court do?
Well, they've become policymakers, Sue.
Exactly.
I mean, they
make rules.
They got their fingers into everything. What I tell people is look I'll give you a couple examples of judges out of control. If you go to our district court level, that's where all the criminal cases originate. The judges are supposed to follow the sentencing guidelines, but they don't. And as a result, Minnesota has the second lowest incarceration rate of any state in the union.
I've heard that. The second lowest incarceration state in the nation.
Yes. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yep. And
maybe our criminals aren't as bad. Wrong.
Well, maybe our judges are.
That could be.
Another example is of policy making is the right to hold your property and not be subject to eminent domain. Just recently, a lot of us heard the Kelo case at the U.S. Supreme Court, which permits the government to take people's property for what they call a public purpose, although the Constitution talks about a public use. And what it's really allowing is the government to take the property of one person and give it to another. What people don't realize is that same thing happened in Minnesota in the Walzer case about 4 or 5 years before the case before the U.S. Supreme Court. That's why these positions are so important, because we are losing our constitutional rights.
That Kelo case it played a huge role in me getting involved in politics in the first place. I started fighting against eminent domain and tax increment financing. We just celebrated the 5-year anniversary of Kelo. Suzette Kelo and her property that was taken away. Do you know the land is still empty? They took the land away from her in her little pink house. It's a fabulous book, The Little Pink House. The Institute for Justice they did a tremendous job on it, even though they lost. They never should have lost. What worries me when you look at the U.S. Supreme Court is these 5-4 rulings, where they take away more and more and more of our rights, and now we find out the same thing's happening here in Minnesota.
Well, and the other thing that's important about this, Sue, is that we have a president right now who is appointing very liberal judges to our U.S. Supreme Court and to our courts of appeals. What I've been telling people is that if that occurs, we're going to end up with our federal constitutional rights being watered down. And what people need to realize is that we have a provision in the law that your state constitutions can provide more rights, expanded rights, than are found in the federal Constitution. So if the federal Constitution gets watered down, the state constitutions are going to become the bulwark of our rights. And we need to really have judges who understand how important those rights are and to support those constitutions.
You have just made a tremendously important point of how important our states' rights are going to become.
Yeah.
Because every one of these rulings, whether you're talking about the gun ban, the Chicago gun ban, or the Heller case in Washington, D.C., you're talking about Kelo, these are 5-4 rulings.
Yep.
This is so scary, and we need our states' rights. We need judges in Minnesota who are going to uphold the rights of we the people. So what about Obamacare? Now let me set the stage here for the viewers.
Yeah.
Obamacare was rammed down our throat by the federal government. You already have maybe 20 states who are suing the federal government, saying they've overstepped their authority and are not Minnesota. Where's Minnesota? Nowhere to be found in this issue. How are the judges going to uphold this?
Well, again, it's going to end up, right now, it's going to end up in the federal courts, not the state courts.
True.
But, you know, if you look at, I think it's an absolute attack on the liberty interests that are in our Constitution. The idea that they're going to force people to buy insurance is just insane. And again, we need to start to stem this. But the problem is that this kind of logic has been going on in our courts incrementally for years and years and years and years. And now we're finally getting to the point where they're trying to tell us, you know, you have to buy insurance at a certain place. That's why we have to, it's going to be an incremental movement back, most likely. But if we don't get control of our courts, we'll never make that move.
Right. So House File 1, the deal that the legislature and the governor put together to end this year's legislative session, where instead of being fiscally responsible like they should have been, they kicked the can down the road. House File 1 puts Obamacare on the books, and that's my terminology there, Obamacare on the books for the state of Minnesota. And that will require, to get rid of that will require a state lawsuit, correct? And our Minnesota judges will have to handle it.
What you're saying is we're creating Obamacare on the state level.
Correct.
Yes, and people should be suing like crazy, I think. If that actually takes effect, it's an absolute attack on liberty interests, and I think it's absolutely unconstitutional. But Sue, the second I tell you that, the state Supreme Court requires that I also tell you that I maintain an open mind.
Oh, that's right.
That's one of their rules. That's one of their rules, that if I state my view on a legal or political issue, I also have to tell you I maintain an open mind.
And that's why we heard the Supreme Court Justice Kagan come out and say she kept an open mind. I thought it was because we knew her brain would fall out, but that's a whole nother.
But again, that's why we have judges who are making policy. We're never going to get away from that entirely, I don't think. But if we're going to have judges who make policy, then we want to have judges who are conservatives and are making conservative policy. Part of conservative policy is to know when you should stay out, when you should say something is a political issue that belongs to the legislature and to the governor and executive branch, and that the judges should stay out. Right now, that break is gone. The judges feel that they can get involved in anything and everything.
And they do.
Yeah, they absolutely do, including funding, including telling the state to spend money. A recent example I can give you would be the unallotment case is an example of judicial activism where my opponent, Helen Meyer, provided the crucial fourth vote, the deciding vote that got involved in how the money is going to be spent by the state. And you know, I look at that case and I just say, why are the judges involved at all? They should be saying this is an issue that should be decided by the legislature and the governor, and they should stay out.